everyone. Welcome back to the Danna-Gift show. I have with me the author of Dirty Love, her newly released book, Kimberly Blackburn. Kimberly grew up in the land of 10,000 lakes, state of Minnesota, and is now living with us in the warm and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. She's still a cold weather girl at heart, where she takes up competitive skiing and other wild sports like racing her Arabian horses, which I totally want to get into because I don't know anybody who competitively races or skis like you do. Which is pretty intense.
Yeah.
She's got two boys who are 4 and 14, and motherhood takes up most of her time right now, but she does continue to do the things in her life to rediscover her soul. We're going to hear about her story of her abusive and emotionally damaging relationship with her ex-husband, the perception and influence of wealth, the lasting trauma. So this is going to get deep, you guys, and how she's been able to come out on the other side of it stronger and wiser. She's now beginning her next chapter in life, starting with the release of her book, Dirty Love, encouraging and inspiring people to seek their own truths and living more authentic lives. So, Kimberly, thank you for being with me here today. I read your book. I read it from start to finish. I would start my mornings reading it, which I'm not going to lie, it was a little heavy to start my mornings, but it was so detailed and specific in the way that you described your life during this time. And honestly, it was very beautiful the way you put it and packaged it in this book. So
thank you.
I'm super excited to dive into that. And for those of you who are listening, you do have to check out her book. It's on Amazon. It's available in audiobook as well. No,
it will be soon, yes.
Okay. So by the time you guys see this, it'll be available on audiobook.
Yeah, which I did the recording myself. So
yeah, and we love when authors do their own recordings of it. I've heard other people have somebody else, they outsource the recording of their book, and I'm glad you decided to do it yourself because it's just, there's something different when you express the words in your book.
Yeah.
It's going to come out more, it's just more you, more authentic.
Yeah.
So I know I don't have a lot of time with you, so let's go ahead and dive right in. Yeah. First off, how are you doing?
I'm good. Gosh, it has been a right.
We're just having a little drink right now.
It has been a whirlwind. Let's see, the book was released in August, and gosh, I've been busy between the podcast work and then promoting through social media, which has been a really fun and challenging but very rewarding experience. So
and I've been seeing your posts online, and just it's great to see your art.
Yeah.
In a way, because you're showing your horses, you're showing your skiing, and for anybody who does read the book, you'll see that part of you wasn't even really mentioned, a little bit, not fully in the book. So you can kind of see that there's, just you weren't shining your brightest light at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I talk, I know I speak on it, not as much in the book, but in an interview that's on my social media, where I talk about the horses and the role they played in my life, that feeling like, it's taken me 10 years to tell this story, but I never really had to share that with the horses. I always felt, in a way, understood just the beauty of being around these animals is that they kind of feel your energy.
They do. Horses are majestic.
They are.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful part of my life, and certainly have played an important role in healing. So I've been very fortunate to be able to have that in my life. And the skiing, gosh, I grew up a ski racer. I got away from it a little bit, and now being able to go back to it is just, I don't know, it's just such a special thing. But it's funny because people who know me, I'm a pretty low-key, pretty reserved person, but there's a side of my personality that comes out skiing that people would never guess. That's fun to
because that's a pretty
show that
can be an aggressive sport.
It is. Right? I mean, I've had a few concussions, and
oh my gosh, you say it so casually. Just a few.
But not. I mean, now I'm. I reeled it in a little bit, but
so no more recent concussions.
No. Although, so no, you're skiing 60 miles an hour down the hill, and it's an adrenaline sport, and it's one that you can't have a lot of fear, but it's an amazing sport in that I was able to take my ski racing background and now as someone older, it's fun to have that skill, and you see some really beautiful parts of the country.
Yeah.
So yeah.
This is an off question.
Sure.
This is before we even get into, the story and everything. But do you feel like, because your sports are very high adrenaline, do you feel like there is something about the adrenaline, some kind of addiction to it in some ways?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, so the horses, the skiing definitely, that adrenaline, is a bit of my personality. And even now, working out is so therapeutic for me. Mm-hmm. But when I go into the gym, I kind of work out like as if I'm still training on an Olympic path for downhill skiing.
Wow.
So that, I think once that's in you, it's always a little bit a part of you.
Yeah.
I think I value my health and my body and what it can do for me. And that's something I've carried, into my old age now. But the horses is a little bit interesting because that I actually show Arabian horses in Western pleasure divisions, and that actually is a much slower pace. It's a very technical sport. So it's a lot of
so you're not racing them.
Not racing
Got
them.
it.
No,
okay, I thought you raced them.
Arabians are a really special breed in that they do so many things. They're so versatile, actually considered one of the most versatile breeds. So everything from Western to English to jumping to racing, to cutting cows and working Western. They do all of that. So no, I show in a discipline that's very technical, and the horses move a lot slower, and it's just a lot of that nonverbal communication between, human and this massive animal.
Yeah,
so
because they're the really huge ones, right? The really giant horses.
Yeah, Arabians tend to be a little bit, they're known for their beauty, exquisite face structure, and they are known for their kind of big personalities, but they tend to be a little bit more, or a little bit smaller than some of the other breeds. But it truly is, it's just such a beautiful part of my life, and I grew up doing it, and got away from it a little bit through college, but I've been able to bring it back into my life, and it just, my time in Texas, which I've shown a little bit.
Yeah. You talked about that in the book.
Yeah, it's so sacred to me.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, well, I definitely want to hear more about that and how that, would you consider it a hobby?
Yeah,
how
hobby,
that came
expensive
back into
hobby.
Yeah. I was going to say, it's not a cheap hobby.
Yes, no, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that.
Yeah.
But so our viewers can get a full scope of your book and I guess the overall arching premise of it. If you could kind of paint a picture of, I guess, how you first met Jeremy.
Yeah, I think as a lot of young women can relate to, and men, being in college and entering kind of your 20-year-old decade, you feel a bit of this pressure, right? Like, I need to graduate, find a career, be able to sustain myself, potentially meet my soulmate, buy a house, have children. There's all these boxes I think you feel like you have to check.
Yeah.
And growing up in a family that really, I have an older brother, a younger sister. We were all very high achieving individuals, and I think it was derailed a bit my sophomore year in college when I lost my mom unexpectedly to cancer in a very short amount of time. And I think having so much structure around my life with training as a downhill skier and the horses, and losing that person that was really my guiding force, I had to grow up really fast.
Was your dad, was he not really involved in raising you all? Or?
So he actually was. He was an amazing father, but when we lost my mom, we lost him for a period of time. Yeah. So and it's hard. I have many thoughts on this now as a mom. I can't imagine not being there for my children, but at the same time, I think when you lose your partner of almost 30 years, it's hard to judge a man or a woman for their, response to that.
Yeah, that's tough.
So in a way, there was probably a 5-year period where he was pretty absent. I had started school at University of Michigan and ended up moving back closer to home in Minneapolis, and was commuting back and forth from University of Wisconsin back to Minneapolis to make sure my sister, who at the time was in high school, was okay. She was often alone, and we just, a lot of people struggle, and it makes us unique. It builds character, but there was that kind of phase of my life where I was thrust into this place that I don't know that I was really ready for, much, like any 20-year-old. So when I graduated college and ended up working in Chicago, I fell into a position at a technology company at a consulting firm. And I was really proud of myself. I was like, gosh, I've been through so much adversity, and here I am actually doing this. I'm living in a big city. I have a career path here. I had so much ambition, which made sense because my mom was very ambitious. She was a doctor and well-educated and really a force.
Yeah.
And then I met Jeremy in the workplace. Yeah. And he was my superior, a couple of layers above me. And for whatever reason, the relationship went from something that, I admired him. He seemed to be, he wasn't much older. I would say 5 or 6 years older. But in experience, he seemed, a decade older than me.
Yeah.
So I admired his sophistication, his intelligence.
And you were how old again at this point?
So I was in my early 20s.
Okay.
Freshly out of college, so probably 22.
I feel like when at least for me, when I was about 22, a man that had some kind of status or held that wisdom that you're talking about would have definitely, I would have been drawn to that.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's just something, it's, you're younger and you don't really know. And so when somebody shows that sense of power, it's attractive.
It was. And I started to get attention back. And it was a nice distraction. I mean, prior to that, I'd been through 2-3 years of just feeling enormous pressure and loss. And this felt different.
Yeah.
And interesting enough, it didn't, and I think I was naive enough, especially being an athlete, my college experience or my high school experience was a little bit different. Like, I didn't go to parties. I was, on the ski hill, I was riding horses. So I was very naive. I think those early signs where the boundaries were crossed from this professional world to something more personal and more intimate, I did not recognize. And it was also in a time that we talked less about that dynamic of women in the workforce. It wasn't that long ago, but I feel like it's only been in recent years where, the Me Too movement and things have become such a force that wasn't in the back of my mind.
Right. Nobody really spoke up about any of that or really any of it. I mean, I even think back to the days when Britney Spears was in the forefront of everything and how what she was showing and everything was seen as such a negative thing because she was scantily. It was sure. At the time. And now we're like, Cardi B is. I'm like, you get famous for shaking your ass now. So it's a world of a difference, I'm sure, from the time when you met Jeremy too.
Yeah, and I think losing my mom, I never had those conversations with her about relationships, and also from a generation with our parents as not being as open as we are today. Like I know with my children, I talk often about the dynamic of relationships, of how, the importance of mental health and these topics that just weren't as talked about when I was, in my late teens.
Yeah.
So I got this attention from someone that everybody admired in the workplace, and it felt good. It felt right. And all of a sudden, I was staffed on projects traveling all over the country. I was working in Manhattan. I had these opportunities that I never thought would be possible, especially with my very limited skill set coming right out of college. And it was an easy button. Like I was working hard, I was learning a lot, but I was like, finally, I feel like I can feel something else. Yeah. Besides the trauma of losing my mom.
Yeah.
So to fast forward a little bit, that workplace romance really budded into something where I made a decision to leave the company, that it no longer was appropriate, and I put my career on hold and really shifted gears to support Jeremy and his career aspirations. And I think was the very beginning of where I started to get it wrong.
So leaving the workplace. What made you come to that decision during that time? So I want to rewind a little bit first.
Sure.
During that time when you and Jeremy were becoming intimate in the workplace, was his wife or anything, was he married at the time, right?
So yeah, when we first met, he was married.
Okay.
But it always was, at first there wasn't a lot of discussion or a lot of insight into his personal life. But I started to pick up on the fact that he wasn't happy and that divorce was imminent and that he was kind of working through those details. But I talk about this often in the book. I didn't actually want to know the details because I almost had this like little girl crush.
Yeah.
So it was...
You wanted to believe that, that was exactly what was happening, that he wasn't happy and that you were the one he was choosing.
Yes, that I was perhaps next up. Yeah. At that time, it didn't occur to me what that would do to my career. And I know in abusive situations, we talk often about that isolation. I think that is really the first moment I remember confiding in my brother, saying, talking about my job and my travels and what I was learning, and then mentioning that I had fallen for a superior, that we had become close, and my brother was adamant. He was like, this can't happen. And immediately, rather than listening, I became defensive. And when you become defensive, you stop listening.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I was angry at him for judging me and my decisions. And from that point on, I kept quiet about this relationship.
So you just stopped sharing with your family what was going on. So that was the beginning of when you stopped sharing.
Yeah.
And so when you said that you ended up leaving that space and choosing to support Jeremy.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why did you leave? Was it he was starting his own company, right? Or
yeah, it was actually a little bit before then, but the company we were working for was going through some restructuring.
Got it. Okay.
So there was a little bit of insecurity, and he was lured away. He had an amazing skill set, a very, very intelligent software developer, just beyond his years and his ability. And he was lured away to another company, and it was outside of Chicago. And it just made, if I wanted to be with him, it meant I needed to go with him.
You needed to move.
I needed to move.
Okay.
Now, when we did move, it's interesting because he was at an executive level in his late 20s. And financially, I didn't feel that pressure of needing to work to support our household.
So he was supporting you at this point?
He was supporting me.
Okay.
And, I had a little bit of money left over from my mom's life insurance policy, but I think that dynamic shifted when you don't feel the pressure to pay your bills.
Yeah.
That you soften a little bit in what you're willing to do. And I became a bit entitled. I wanted to be working, but I didn't want to settle for a job that I felt was beneath me, even though I was still so young and so inexperienced.
Right.
So that really set the tone for, I think, the 5 years that followed that, is that my identity became Jeremy's success.
Wow.
And that's where I lost myself in this relationship. So as soon as the things became unhealthy, going from a very controlling relationship to what you read about in Dirty Love and how that escalated to physical and verbal abuse and abandonment. Mm-hmm. I felt like I had no other option.
Yeah.
Because I had, in a way, sold myself to this life with Jeremy.
Yeah.
And I stopped creating options for myself. And I certainly take full accountability for that. So that was one thing I really wanted to, when you talk about describing in great detail, I wanted to show how that evolved.
Yeah. And you did a really good job at it, because even you talking about your wedding day.
Sure.
That really blew my mind. Can you explain how that whole thing went down?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because that, as hard as that was to share, that was my first experience with physical violence.
So that was the first time he got physical. Were there any signs before that he would be this?
I think in hindsight, yes. Mm-hmm. His mannerisms, I mean, he was diagnosed as bipolar, and while at the time I had no idea what that meant. You start to normalize, like in any relationship, you kind of adapt to your partner's quirks, right? Yeah. So I thought that's what I was doing. But his highs were very high, his lows were low. There was never this like happy center.
He was never just content.
No. And in a way, I thought that that's what made Jeremy so special, right? That's what made him so capable of doing such big things, is his extremes.
It's kind of like when somebody has that fire, you get attracted because they're passionate.
Yes.
But also the lows can be very low.
Yeah, and and in many ways, I almost celebrated that aspect of his personality, because I knew he was destined for great things.
Yeah.
And I saw the people that surrounded him and how much they admired his work ethic and his skill set. But the impact on me, that unpredictability, we've talked about that, is hard. It builds insecurity. You start to make compromises and start to shift the way you want your day to go, because you think that maybe in doing that you'll get the side of Jeremy that feels the best, right?
Like the part of him that you fell in love with.
Yeah. Yep. And so those tendencies started very early on, and it's control. Mm-hmm. It's someone having that amount of control on you that you wake up thinking, gosh, okay, how can I structure my day that will be the most fulfilling for us together? Not necessarily for me.
Yeah. You were fitting it around his schedule and trying to.
And it's hard. Obviously, it's hard sharing this now, because having grown through this, it's hard to put myself back to that person that I was. So the control happened, and it started very early on. And then the evening, actually, the night before our wedding, we were at we decided to have a destination wedding. We were at a beautiful resort in Colorado, so close to my heart, because I had spent so much time in Colorado skiing.
That's beautiful there, too.
Yeah, and our families had traveled, and the night before the wedding, we had a heated exchange, simply about me purchasing some makeup. I had a makeup trial, which most women do before they get married, right?
Yeah.
And he was upset about it.
So at this point, and just to get some kind of context, how much did you spend on the wedding without the makeup?
Sure. So this, it was extravagant, yes, but it wasn't near what you read about in Dirty Love. Mm-hmm. So by that point, Jeremy, as an executive, was making probably $250,000 as an executive for a software company. We had a beautiful home in the suburbs of St. Paul, Minnesota. In my early 20s, I almost lived a life that was comparable to a family maybe in their mid to late 30s. Our home was in a neighborhood where everybody had children that were in elementary school. It was not your typical,
like starter home,
right? Yeah. But I wouldn't have said it was, it was upper middle class. It wasn't the extreme wealth that you see as Dirty Love unfolds. Mm-hmm. But the wedding certainly was probably $50,000 or $60,000, and we had 25 guests, and it was very intimate but very beautiful. And when that night happened, and I got my first glimpse into Jeremy taking his frustrations out in a very physical way, it was confusing, but my first reaction was protective of him. And it was
rationalizing why he acted that way.
Yeah, and part of that is that it's the night before your wedding. Yeah. You have your most cherished, friends and family there. And how do you exit out of that, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. So I certainly didn't exit, and I immediately went to, my idea of having this wedding and spending this money has created this stress.
So you were blaming yourself for the way he acted.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that I think is very very common in victims of abuse, is that being very protective of your abuser, fawning over them. And that's what I did. And I described, that was probably one of the hardest chapters to write in Dirty Love, is that nobody knew that. Nobody knew that happened.
So you showed up, walked down the aisle, smiles and everything, and had that feeling, or that gut feeling of, wow, that really just happened the night before.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gosh, that must have been very difficult for you.
Yeah.
Did the rest of the wedding go well, or?
Yeah, it was beautiful. And that, I think that is the tricky part, and what I hope to really convey in the book is that there are a lot of really bright, beautiful moments in our life. Mm-hmm. Certainly some of which that money affords, but the travel, the horses, the experiences, going to the Kentucky Derby, like having opportunities that most people in their 20s just getting started will never see.
Yeah. And
that has a power over you.
It really does.
And so I think, when someone forces you in the corner of a bathroom the night before your wedding, and there is a moment that you're not sure when it's going to end, but it does, and you're safe, and you get up and you walk out of your marble bathroom at the Ritz-Carlton, and you look at the snow falling outside in the mountains and all the beauty that's around you, it's maybe a little bit easier to say, okay, it's going to be okay, because this is such an amazing life that I have. And I think that is where, really, when I talk about the dynamic of having that material wealth, having those privileges, how that plays on keeping you still in an abusive relationship.
It can kind of blur the lines of what is acceptable or not, right? Because I bet, and we'll dig more into this too, I bet a lot of people were just telling you, Jeremy is a catch. Yeah. Jeremy is this, and all the things from the outside perspective, but no, like you said, nobody knew about the abuse and the emotional damage that occurred throughout the relationship. So it's kind of hard when everybody and everything is telling you this is good.
Yeah.
But you knew.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned being a princess trapped in her tower.
Yeah. Is that how you felt?
Yeah, and in many ways, yeah. I mean, at the time, it's harder looking back at it now, because I was such a sad person. But at the time, it wasn't until after I had Cal that I really realized I needed to make change. But before having a child, I normalized it. It's like, everybody wants my life. I can handle these little quirks of Jeremy. I never felt that my life was in danger. It was in danger. But I never felt that way.
Interesting, yeah.
And the power that, when you have, like the wedding night, when that happens, and then hours later, sitting by a fireplace, and he fastens a diamond tennis bracelet around your wrist. that it's like a drug in a way. The immediate gratification of having shiny things.
Yeah. And it's easy to forgive when somebody apologizes in that manner.
Yeah, absolutely. And that coupled with my just complete lack of relationship experience, the trauma of losing my mom, I was so vulnerable to that behavior. Yeah. I wanted a life with him, and I was going to do it at any expense.
Yeah.
Which is a hard thing to say, but it absolutely is how I felt. And in some ways, having made a decision to end my career path and make that choice, I felt like I needed to prove something, because I did have my brother, showing concerns that this was not healthy for me. So
you wanted to prove them wrong in some ways.
Mm-hmm,
that you were going to make it work.
Yeah, that certainly played into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there... So, and I'm kind of just going to summarize more of your relationship, because you guys have to just read the book. So, in the book, you mentioned how many times you really didn't see Jeremy throughout your marriage.
Yes.
Even during your pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
Did that help you in some ways to maybe find more of yourself, or was it more lonely?
That's an interesting question, because I think at first, the times he was absent, I was very much living for the next time he would be home. So I would be creating, keeping this perfect house and making plans. So when he did come home, everything was perfect, despite the fact that it couldn't have been further from the truth.
Yeah.
So one would think that if I spent so much time alone, I could be working towards a master's degree, or really diving into other relationships, friendships, or picking up a new hobby, any number of things. Especially before having children, I had the money to do whatever I wanted, even travel.
Yeah.
But I didn't do any of that. I kind of led this very sheltered life. I was very protective of what Jeremy was doing. I didn't really want to share with anybody that he was traveling almost 100% of the time. I wanted to sell our story and the start of his software company as this big success story. So I kept that very protected. And that unfortunately led into, when I discovered I was pregnant. And I was alone for 9 months. And it was always under the assumption that, Jeremy would assure me, if I just put this time in, I can step away from Canopy Financial, or this company will be sold. There was always like, we're working towards this.
Just a promise.
A promise. Mm-hmm. Now we know that tomorrow isn't even promised to us. So at some point, while we have goals that we work towards the future, you live for today.
Yeah.
And especially in relationships, you can't divide ways and just assume you can come back together and it's fine. It doesn't work that way. A relationship does take work.
You do got to put in the effort, the time.
The intention every single day.
Yeah.
That wasn't clear to me at the time. I truly thought that he could focus on the rise of Canopy Financial, check that box, and that he would be ready to retire and focus on family and having children. There's so many problems with that thinking. First being that Jeremy he always wanted the high of starting a new company, of being the smartest in the room, of developing new ways to use technology, which he was just a master at. So there was never an exit for him. But in my mind, there was, if I just gave him that space to do what I knew he could do.
Yeah. So when you found out that you were pregnant, what were you excited, knowing how Jeremy has shown you who he is?
Yeah. So it's interesting, when we first talked about getting pregnant, probably a year before it actually happened, I was really excited. And then I noticed a shift in Jeremy, which I talk about in Dirty Love, and how his kind of career. He jumped around a little bit from a few companies until he ultimately decided to start Canopy Financial.
Yeah.
And when I felt kind of that shift in his focus, I was like, we're at a table having a baby. And then when it happened unexpectedly, I was scared to tell him. Like I actually went to the doctor a few times before I told him. I waited long enough where I remember the doctor actually asking me if I was going to have a supportive partner.
Oh, wow, because he never went to any of the doctor's appointments?
No.
None?
No, once I did tell him, he ended up going to one appointment where we discovered the sex of the baby. But no, and then he showed up for, we had a C-section because Cal was breech, which was perfect for Jeremy because it was scheduled and he was present during that. Yeah. But I know, and I talk in Dirty Love about going to, imagine in your 20s, you're pregnant, you've lost your mom, you're not letting a lot of people in because you don't want people to know the expense of this life that you're living. I'm going to maternity classes by myself. Gosh. I'm sitting in the hospital classroom and it's, looking around at the other couples together and trying to normalize this, trying to say, okay, like this is worth it. We're doing big things, right?
Yeah.
But obviously there are moments where it's sadness. Yeah. It's like, gosh, this isn't what I imagined it to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gosh. So at what point, and again, guys, just got to read the book because I want to dive more into your psyche after Jeremy and how this relationship has affected you, transformed you, because there's beauty to the story at the end of the day. Obviously, you're here and you're talking about it, you're sharing with the world. Yeah. But so I don't want to give away the ending. I really don't. I don't want to give away the ending.
I can give away the ending.
Okay, give away the ending because I feel like that's I didn't expect the ending of the story, and I told you I was shocked that, and I'll let you.
Well, and the way the story unfolds, and stop me if I'm going too far into it. Our life really transforms after Callan is born. Jeremy and I are very estranged. We barely see each other, but he makes an appeal to me and says, I see Canopy Financial being sold. We have interest in it. I'm spending a lot of time in Malibu or in Los Angeles, and I'd like to move there. Mm-hmm. And up until that point, we had really laid down roots in Minnesota. We had plans to build a house, and so it completely caught me by surprise. But I agreed. I knew no one in Southern California. I had been to Malibu once, which there's a chapter on that for my sister's bridal shower, which
it's
a whole
oh my gosh,
whole other
that part I was like
did
you ever find so that was it? Did it belong to? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Goodness. Yeah, that's a whole different chapter.
Yes, there was a beach house that I visited in Malibu, and I didn't realize, but it was Jeremy had actually rented the house, and we had used it for that weekend to celebrate my sister. But I start picking up on signs as we're staying that weekend. I'm having trouble sleeping because the ocean is so loud. It's
right up
it's under the house.
Yeah.
And I'm walking around this house and I see these signs that it's actually Jeremy that lives here. Mm. And I still wasn't ready to see it. So months later, I take a leap of faith and move to Malibu with Cal. We fly there in a private jet, just Cal and I, a jet made for a professional sports team.
Gosh.
And at this point, I have every bit of insecurity and worry that this isn't the right choice. But at the same time, I was like, well,
maybe a fresh start.
Maybe it's a fresh start, and I have to try. I have a child.
Yeah.
Like I never envisioned raising a child without a partner, even though I was doing it, which was interesting.
Yeah. Wow.
So in moving to Malibu. I wasn't there but 2 months before I caught wind of an FBI investigation that Jeremy's company, Canopy Financial, was under investigation for misappropriating venture capital money, almost $100 million. And that Jeremy had been using this money to fund this very lavish lifestyle, part of which I was living in Malibu and some of the things that we were doing. But a big part of it was funding his extracurricular activities, which included another relationship. And
can you tell the listeners out there, this other relationship, she was almost a replica of the life that he created with you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, even down to her appearance, which was interesting. But a younger version of me with the same vulnerabilities that perhaps I had coming right out of college. But yeah, by the time the relationship really came crashing down, he had a house with her a mile away from our house in Malibu.
Gosh.
They had the same kind of dog. There was, this part of the story is not as clear on, I touch on it a little bit, but he was engaged to be married to her, but we were still married. So it was a very, very complicated situation. But I found that out within weeks of finding out about this FBI investigation. So when I caught wind of what was happening to Canopy Financial, I knew that life was going to change. It just seemed so surreal because in my mind, Jeremy had been working relentlessly to build this very impressive, healthcare software company. So I was like, there has to be a logical explanation.
Yeah. You're like, where did you find the time
to
do this?
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then once I got the phone call from his assistant, which shed light on this other relationship, I realized that nothing I knew to be true was actually true.
Yeah.
So here I am in a $6 million mansion overlooking the ocean with a very small child. My credit cards are frozen. I have access to one bank account, but I have nobody, in part because I created a life where I had no support.
Because you kept people out.
Because I kept people out, and I had to unravel it all.
Gosh. And you felt, you describe in the book when you found out all of this, the FBI investigation, that you felt in danger. You actually hired a security guard to circle around because you felt that danger.
Yeah, so I hired the security guard after I found out about Jeremy's double life. So it was about, 2 weeks after I found out about the FBI investigation. And because honestly, I know it seems crazy, but it never occurred to me that Jeremy would be unfaithful. Even in all of his travels.
Even through the FBI investigation, that was not something you never considered.
No, I didn't consider him to, and I am such a loyal person. Infidelity it just wasn't even and I say it and I realize, like, looking back, how silly it seems. But I truly thought he was working. So the moments where I was interviewed by the FBI and by, be sitting at a table with, 6 or 7 attorneys around me asking me, if I knew about his travels to the most exotic places, or him purchasing, luxury items, I would sit there with just this blank expression, like, this doesn't make sense. Like
and that's when you first heard about all these extra expenses, right? Was right in front of attorneys and people. So how was that keeping your composure? Were you able to?
Yeah, no.
No. I wouldn't have been able to either.
I mean, I think, and I talk about it in a chapter about how I was supposed to give kind of an information gathering session to they call him the federal bankruptcy trustee, and their goal is to recover as many assets as possible to try to pay back all of the people that the money was stolen from.
Yeah, wow.
So it was in my best interest to cooperate. because I truly did not know what Jeremy was up to.
Yeah.
So I wasn't concerned that I would be implicated, but it hung over my shoulders.
Yeah.
And obviously there's no handbook on what to do when your husband is implicated in a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah. If you guys find one, please let us know.
Yeah. I was, I had no idea what to do. So there were moments, and I remember, which I detail because it was, I can remember it like yesterday. There was an itinerary of NetJets, which was the private jet service we used. Mm-hmm. And it was a very thick binder. And when I first opened it up, I was like, that's interesting because I can recall maybe 7 or 8 trips. But here's this binder that is like, almost 100 pages.
Worth of
trips.
Oh, my goodness.
And they started out by having me kind of flip through these pages and ask me, where the flight was going and who was on the flight, if I knew anyone. And page after page, I didn't know a single person. But I saw the women. He wasn't traveling alone. And you can't be doing a lot of work when you're going to the Bahamas or to Hawaii.
Yeah.
It was clearly for another purpose. So there was a moment that absolutely broke me. But that was their goal. Is because if I got so mad at Jeremy, I would tell them everything that I knew. Wow. But in reality, I didn't know a lot.
Yeah.
And that actually helped me, is that Jeremy created such a complex life. I am guessing there are many women that it was probably even hard for him to keep track of. Yeah. And I certainly, didn't even know where to start.
Yeah. So. Did you ever get to meet the other woman that he created an alternate life with?
Yeah, no, I have not met her, but they did have a child.
They did?
After Jeremy and I separated. So Cal does have a half-brother.
Got it.
I've never met her. I've never really had the desire to.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure if she knows there's a book out there. But the sad part is that she has her own story.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah.
And, I hope she's found her truths and she's healed through this. But I had almost 10 years with Jeremy and she had a fraction of that time. But,
yeah. Wow.
But yeah, there's another woman out there. There's probably many women out there with their own stories of their time with Jeremy.
Yeah. I want to dive more into how you're doing today and how you've healed from all of this, because your story is unique in that Jeremy did pass.
Yes.
And so you were telling me before that on average it takes about how long for somebody to recover from an abusive relationship? You said 8 years?
It actually takes about 8 times
for
a woman to leave their abuser.
So the act of physically leaving, they would have to leave about 8 times.
8 times, right?
Wow.
Because that trauma and what that does to a woman's psyche, it's just a very complicated process.
Mm-hmm.
The way you build up those defense mechanisms, that survival instinct, and just not believing that you're worthy of more.
Yeah.
And I think in my situation was very unique. I had no other option. Especially with a small child, I had to protect my child. I knew I needed to start over. And by supporting Jeremy was in a way admitting guilt myself, that I supported a man who harmed so many people. And I couldn't do that. Now, in a typical abusive relationship, there isn't that. And women, from an outside perspective, when you see a woman's life is in danger, it seems obvious that she would want to leave. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, you get to a place after years of that treatment, of that gradual process of control and imbalance of power, to then, maybe it's verbal abuse and physical abuse, that often victims, they don't see a life that's better than that. And I think that's where the the average in 8 times to exit a relationship of that nature. But even more compelling is that often women repeat that in subsequent relationships.
Yeah.
Without that proper, the healing, the clarity into, what that relationship brought, what they've learned, quickly jumping to another relationship. And there's a lot of factors that play into that. And, financial dependence is one.
Self-worth being a huge one. I remember a study done on how people find their partners, and they broke it down that people attract the partners that they feel is equivalent to how they feel about themselves. So whether that be like in a physical manner or in a personality trait, they say that people attract how they feel inside. So if you feel shitty, if you don't feel good about yourself, you're going to find a partner who's going to treat you in that manner. Not to say that abusive relationships and stuff is all your fault, but when you find yourself repeatedly finding those relationships, then it's maybe a time to start looking deeper and improving your self-worth too.
Absolutely. And I think I can relate in that. I remember once I was able to get back to Minnesota, back home from Malibu. I have a small child. I'm college educated, but I have very limited work experience. And I'm walking University of Minnesota, and I'm walking through the law building, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm going to go back to school because I've had 4 attorneys help me through this, and I swear I can do a better job. In my heart, I was like, I can do this. But then taking a step back, looking at the realities, how do I care for a small child? How do I pay for childcare? And how do I take on the student loans? I have no family around me. How do I make this work? It's felt impossible. And I was fortunate to have a friend that I moved in with, but there's so many women that don't have those options. So all of a sudden, staying in a situation that maybe you think you can control or manage to some level seems more attractive than taking that leap.
Trying to figure it out.
And especially when you have a child. Because it adds an enormous pressure. And it's a complicated dynamic. It's not as easy as, what it would seem from the outside. Certainly.
In what ways have you started to find yourself again after this relationship? I mean, obviously you picked up skiing and your Arabian horses, and that's all stuff that you did even prior to Jeremy. And so you found your way back to that. But is there other things that you've done that have, brought you back to you?
It's such a tricky question because, I know how I want to answer it, but it couldn't be further from the truth. So I'm just going to be totally honest with you. I didn't deal with it.
You didn't deal with it?
I didn't deal with it at all. I jumped right back into another relationship. I found a safe place. I was very lucky. I just, in my heart, thought if I replaced the memories and just lived my life, and every day kind of looked the same, which is such a gift when you live in, for many years, where when you wake up, you don't know what you're going to be hit with, which was definitely my time with Jeremy. But I thought that if I could just find that normalcy, I would be okay. So I didn't do work on myself. I dove into the care of my children, into working out, to eating healthy. And all of a sudden, about, I would say 3 years ago, I had this moment where I was like, gosh, I have this great life, but I don't like myself. I feel very restless. Is this all that there is in my life? I couldn't really pinpoint the feeling, but something was still holding me back. But it was because I was still so still in life. I lacked so much self-confidence. I think on the surface, people saw me as poised as I was, and seemingly having it all figured out, having, the most perfect organic gluten-free lunches prepared for my child, that I must be okay. But I wasn't. I think deep down inside, I was really struggling to find that purpose. And fast forward a little bit, but I was on a plane, and I just happened to start talking to a random stranger, and I shared this story, and I shared details with her that I've never shared with anybody.
This was prior to the book.
Prior to writing.
Sharing. Yeah.
And days later, I had a note from her in my inbox, and she was the CEO of a major publishing company.
Oh my gosh.
And she said, Kimberly, you need to tell your story.
Wow.
And it's time.
And you had no idea that that's what she was.
I had no idea.
Wow.
So I decided, okay, I'm going to tell this story. And I think that by writing it down, and I talk about this often, it's very cathartic, but it becomes no more and no less than what you see on paper. So it's a way of taking ownership of it. It's a way of taking the power it has over you out of it and turning it into your purpose or your strength. And I knew that could be an important part of healing from this. And so I think from that point, I knew that diving back into the story and reliving it in many ways for 11 months was maybe what I needed to do to then close the wounds back up the right way. So that was, it's only been, 2.5 years.
Yeah.
Since setting that intention that I'm going to show people exactly what happened to me and actually set the intention to heal.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I brushed it aside, and I thought that it would just be okay. But trauma is tricky like that. You can't run from it. It will
keep resurfacing.
It will resurface.
Yeah. Do you feel like that has, because I know obviously when you wrote this brought up a lot of those, you had to write it in detail, all the memories. Has that helped you now that you've set the intention to heal, or do you feel like in some ways it kind of set you back in some ways?
Yeah, I think if you saw me or knew me while I was writing, you would worry.
Really?
Yes, like there were moments where I was not in a very safe place. I was very sad. It was a very intense process.
Yeah.
Because living it 10 years ago, I had all of those defense mechanisms, right? I was in survival mode. I was really focused on my child.
Yeah.
But revisiting it is revisiting it with all of the wisdom and the maturity and the hindsight that I have today.
Yeah.
So I could see it. What was so interesting is I could see the event so clearly, but then with this perspective that was really intense. In fact, I talk about this in giving myself permission to write. When I started writing, it took me 4 or 5 weeks to actually let myself
write freely.
Wow. Like I started out almost in an outline format with bullet points. Like it was very unemotional. And I'm not a big drinker, but I started drinking heavily. I'm like, something has to give me permission to revisit this.
Yeah.
And once I did, and I would travel from coffee shop to cafe to trying to find the right place to be inspired. But once I freely gave myself permission to do that, it came quickly. There were times that I couldn't, my thoughts would go faster than what I could type.
Yeah.
And then I knew it was just necessary.
Yeah. Is that, you feel a strong calling to share this story to hopefully inspire other women to confront their traumas and speak up about it and live more authentically?
Yeah, I think, and that is such an important question, because I do believe that all of us can write down the most traumatic thing that has happened to us, and it can stay just with us. And it is a very, very powerful way to heal. But there was some point in the story that I said, I think it can help just one person.
Wow.
And if I can help one person, then it's worth showing the world what I've been through. And, as you know, I don't hold back.
Yeah.
I share a lot of really intimate details that were hard for me to share.
Yeah.
But I knew that maybe there's a reason why I went through this. And if it could help someone else, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. I do believe that the experiences we have in life, we can either choose, like you said, to keep that within yourself and not share it. But I feel like your story is very unique in how, I don't know the word for it, just how big it was, right? How big Jeremy put himself in Canopy Financial, and like how big just that entire experience was. And I think that you experienced it on a different level that in some ways needs to be told, because other people wouldn't pay attention if it was just another story.
Sure.
Right? So I feel like your message is in some, not more powerful, but powerful in its own uniqueness, that people would actually open their eyes to it to see.
Absolutely. And I can speak to women, and especially in our culture now, this younger generation of influencers and micro-influencers, that unfortunately there's like that perception of influence or wealth or admiration comes from also the perception of what we wear, where we travel to, who we're with, what we drive. And I see these very young women showing sides of themselves, especially on social media, at the expense of who they truly are.
Oh, yeah.
And so to be in a position where I can say, look, I've flown on a private jet countless times. I've had Bentleys and Lamborghinis and, a Range Rover in every single color. I have all the designer clothes.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you that this isn't your path to being truly fulfilled in life.
Yeah.
And the value you place on those things to create that perception that you are important can come at an expense. And often that can be aligning yourself with people that are just not good for your health or your well-being, or being in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And that is compelling. And I think that is the message that many young men and women alike, but a lot of women need to hear.
Yeah. I know a lot of people who are willing to give up themselves for the security of finances, but they're willing to live in more solitude because of those things.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to see, because I've had friends who have gotten into those relationships and I watch their light in some ways dim.
Yeah.
Right?
So true, yeah.
So how do you, if there's someone out there who feels this way, even an inkling, or has some kind of something firing off where they're like, maybe I need to dig a little bit more into myself, is there a message or something that you could share with them to begin to seek themselves?
Yeah, I think, I was at a wedding recently. I'm going to maybe diverge a little bit, but I'm going to come back. And there was a toast given where a gentleman stood up and said, you are like two halves that make this whole. And I was sitting there, and in my head I was like, no, that's not it. That's not it at all.
Oh, please don't tell her.
So, point one, don't take me to a wedding. No.
Unless there's drinks.
Right. But no, I think men and women alike, like, we have a path that fulfills us. And that is independent of any relationship. So I think the most beautiful relationship is when you have two people that are very solid in who they are and where they want to go. And those paths are very independent of each other. But then they come together in the most beautiful way where you support each other at individual times.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we lose ourselves in loving people, is that when all of a sudden your support, or there's an imbalance of that. And maybe it is because for a financial reason. And often when women say, well, if he makes more money, it just makes more sense for me to stay at home with the children. Or it doesn't mean that your path and your goals aren't as worthy.
Wow, yeah.
And that is where I really got it wrong. So I think that is a really important message in if I could do it all over again, and finding myself and finding a relationship that is really authentic, is that, first of all, put the brakes on the idea in your 20s you're going to find your soulmate.
Yeah.
Because to be honest with you, you need to find yourself first.
Yep.
And it's hard to say that happens in your 20s.
Yeah. I've only seen a few people who actually stuck out with their high school love.
Yeah. I mean, I think...
It's very rare.
Yeah, and it is a beautiful thing if that can happen.
Right.
But I think unless you're growing and changing, in your 20s is a beautiful time to explore that.
Yeah.
And through a number of events, not just, losing my mom, but I do think the day I met Jeremy changed my life forever. And if I could do it again, I would never give that much power to one person.
I think that's already just probably the most golden nugget we can get from everyone. I love that. And it's true. They always say, what is that saying? Try not to keep all of your eggs in one basket. And I think it's true, because if you give everything to somebody else, you fit your schedule around them, you do everything. And I've done this countless times with past relationships, just wanting to please, honestly, and just losing myself in that. It's not healthy. You start to feel almost like a body without a soul.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to explain it, but that's what it feels like. You start to just live everything waiting for them to make the next move, and then you move.
Absolutely.
And it's not easy.
In fact, I heard, and it could be as simple as, say you're in the healthiest of relationships, but we all find ourselves waiting for that text, right? Wondering,
gosh, yeah.
how come the text isn't coming, right?
Yeah.
So you sit and wait and torture yourself, or you could take that opportunity to pick up a book, or go walk outside, give your dog a bath. Like all sorts of things that we need to do to prioritize ourselves, our growth, our healing, rather than fixating on how this other person fills our soul. We need to do it independent of that.
Yeah, I believe that.
Easier said than done, yes.
Yeah,
but
small practices, I think. Have you been taking small practices and things, because I know you're a mom.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's also that could be a whole nother podcast of finding yourself in motherhood.
Yeah.
But have you started taking just kind of small things to yourself when you have a time to yourself?
Yeah, and I'm very fortunate. I am very real about this, because there are many women that come out of abusive relationships that are struggling, working multiple jobs, I get that, and I am in a really unique position where I get to take the time to not only write this book with full support of my children, of my household, but also now take the time to promote it, to do podcast work, to take trips to Texas to ride my horses.
Yeah. You're going skiing tomorrow, too.
To go ski tomorrow.
Yeah.
That is so rare.
Yeah.
And it's such a gift. And I realize that. And I think even after now writing this, the times that I had, and I haven't shared this with many people, but back in October, I rode in a horse competition, our nationals competition, which is the biggest event. It happens in October in Oklahoma. And in writing the book, I hadn't ridden my horses, I hadn't competed, I had done nothing.
Oh, wow.
And I showed up to nationals, and I was like, I'm just going to do this, trust the process. And I know manifesting is such a buzzword for 2023, right? We're all going to manifest.
Yeah.
Well, it ended up winning a national championship, which is incredibly challenging to do.
Yeah.
So really digging into that work, and then having these glimpses of light come into my life in such a beautiful way, but with such a new appreciation that I'm now showing you who I really am.
Yeah.
And that's pretty special. But yeah, I mean, my life, I've always been a bit of a health nut and a nutrition nut, but my therapy is truly working out and moving my body and spending time with my children, of course. And but now it just feels, and I've always had that, but it just feels different. It feels more intentional. I have more appreciation. And truly, it's from just telling this story.
It's like a release for you. You've been able to release this story, this book, that allowed you to move forward and close that chapter. Absolutely. And not that it'll ever be fully closed. It's, it's a part of you and your story.
It is. But now I talk about it, and I mentioned this to someone the other day, that does it define me? No, but it makes me really well equipped in life. I don't think that there's anything you could, with what I've been through, that you could put in front of me that I would be scared of. But I have a confidence about me. And that's like
that was my next question. Yeah. How's your confidence now?
Yeah, and that's what's been fun to show on social media, is I am very scared of social media. And
you do great on it, honestly. I look at your pictures, I'm like, oh my gosh, so elegant.
Well, keep in mind, and this is like hard to talk about, but prior to starting this process of promoting the book, I mean, I had a hard time seeing any picture of me. And there were times I didn't even want to look at myself in the mirror, even years after.
Wow.
And I knew attention I would get, but I just never. It's so deeply embedded in me, and that lack of self-confidence. And so the process of showing picture after picture of me on social media, it's still hard. I still cringe a bit, but there's such a bigger purpose to it.
Yes.
And it has become way more than promoting a book. It's become seeing the sides of me that make me who I am. And there's a lot of self-worth, a lot of self-confidence that has come from that. And it's been fun to show different sides of me that people would never guess.
Yeah, like I would have not guessed the competitive skating.
Yeah. And I said if I was going to do social media, I was going to do it in a really unique way that shows power and strength and confidence. It shows that women can be beautiful in a dress, but also badass on a ski hill. And I think that's rare.
Yeah.
I think women are quick to take off their clothes and seek attention for superficial.
Oh gosh.
And we're so much more than that. And if I can inspire, if you don't read the story, if I can inspire women in a different way, I'm happy to do that. But it's been very healing for me, which many people don't realize. So while they're like, oh gosh, another picture of her, it's I'm
sure no one's thinking that.
And just my very first post was in a black suit. And this sounds dramatic, but I actually cried for most of the day when that post hit.
Really?
It was that hard for me. And that was just May. Hasn't even been a year.
Was it just... I think I recall the picture.
Yeah.
And if I can find out, that's right here.
But
But was it just because it was different to see you in that light, or were you still...
scared of judgment, feeling vulnerable, not wanting to be public, not wanting to be guarded.
Yeah.
It's still hard to talk about. Not feeling out of control.
Yeah.
Like knowing that I had signed up with a content creator who's changed my life. that's another podcast topic. But feeling like I needed to trust this process.
And just surrender and let go, let loose, let the things play out in the way that it's going to.
Yeah, and I have lost a lot of people, and this is an important topic, and women who choose not to share their stories, the public shaming and private shaming in your own families is real. It happens.
Yeah.
I have family members that won't talk to me, which is confusing, right? I know now it's a reflection of themselves, not of me.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the issue of domestic violence, and we talk about women sharing their stories and normalizing talking about relationship issues, this is where the cycle stops. Like, we have to feel comfortable talking about it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to feel comfortable unless people are ready to receive it. And not everybody is.
Yeah.
You know, so that's something that through telling my story, I've seen now the other side. And so now that I am able to support women and through various organizations that I've been involved with, I feel that. I get it. I have that perspective.
And do you just keep a door open for if those women can put their defenses down? Do you just keep a door open if they want to reach out to you? And
yeah, that's tricky.
It's hard.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think you do. I think everybody is worthy of a second chance and of that growth. It is a complicated subject.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. My intentions have been questioned. My motivations have been questioned. And I always, it's always interesting to me, because if I wanted to get attention, I don't know that I would have shared all of these secrets about me.
Yeah.
Right? Or gone through this process.
Yeah. It's not easy to be put in the light.
No, to be that vulnerable.
Yeah.
But I can't actually control that. But I do hope that, the people that I love dearly that have turned on me a bit, that I hope that at some point in their life they acknowledge, as a woman, we all have our struggles. Maybe it's breast cancer, maybe it's infertility or infidelity. And I mean, there's any number of issues we tackle as women. And I think by sharing our stories, that's what connects us.
Yeah.
And, my hope is to spread that message, But that is complicated.
Yeah. Thank you, first of all, for sharing your story.
You're
and
welcome.
Talking to such a very vulnerable time in your life and being able to put it on a book. Before we end it, I do have to ask, because you mentioned before that there's a story behind the photo of the book.
Yes.
Can you explain that?
Yes. So from the very beginning, my publisher was like, your picture needs to be on the cover of the book. Like, one of the reasons why the story is so compelling is you. Mm-hmm. The way you tell your story. And I was not hearing it. As I just described, I didn't, like, my first picture on Instagram, I was very emotional. So I was certainly not ready to have this. I have a very close friend who has photographed my children and me for many years. Mm-hmm. And I happened to stop by to deliver some flowers. And she always has her camera. And I wasn't paying attention. And she took this picture.
Really? So this is a candid photo.
This is a candid photo.
Wow.
And she's just the most amazing, talented woman, and has been so supportive of me. Mm-hmm. So she sent me a few pictures, and this was one of them. And I looked at it and I said, I see the Kimberly that is 20, and then I see the Kimberly that is now, and in this picture. I said, this is the cover of the book. Wow. But it took me probably 6 months to embrace the idea that this is what it would be. That's an extremely vulnerable thing to actually put your face to the story.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. Yeah.
It's now a step in your healing, a step in your confidence, and I love that you chose you to be on the cover, because it is your story. And this picture, I mean, you look beautiful, you look like you've gone through a lot, but still, I don't know what it is about the picture, but it's very strong in its own unique way.
Thank you. It's the shades of light, right? The brightness and the darkness all coming together there in such a beautiful way. So, yeah.
Yeah. All the facets of you.
Yeah.
What a great way to put it on a book. I love that. Thank you for being on this podcast. Honestly, you sharing your vulnerability is not easy for anyone to do. So if you guys are interested in reading the book, again, it's on Amazon. The Audible version of it will be available by the time you guys see this podcast. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.
Thank you.